Welcome to the latest episode of The Finnovator, and this is a conversation I am very excited to share. My guest in this episode is Kate Shanahan, who is the co-founder of Brieff. It's an advisory platform that's transforming how accounting firms deliver business advice to small businesses, that coveted business advisory. But Kate's story is about way more than just building tech. It's about resilience, it's about reinvention, it's about listening to your gut, even when the world expects you to take a different path. And as somebody who never regretted exiting corporate and taking the path less traveled, I loved hearing from her. I was raised in the heart of Manhattan, big, scary New York, and started a career at the prestigious halls of Goldman Sachs. But after a personal turning point that began with a profound loss, she set out to create something that was more meaningful for her. And you're about to hear how this sudden tragedy ultimately changed the course of her life, and also gave her the courage to move not just cities, but continents, from New York to Sydney. And what really struck me during our conversation was the scale of the story behind Brieff itself. Picture this. Kate's mum buys a strip club in Montana to turn into a community restaurant. Kate's co-founder, Matt, helps his brother start an electrician business from scratch during the chaos that was COVID. And it's these kind of slices of real life that became the seeds for a startup that's now empowering accountants and small businesses. And I think a lot of it's down to this relentless drive you're going to hear from Kate to solve real problems, one check-in at a time. So if you're interested in startups, business advisory, or as I am, the personal side of entrepreneurship, I promise you're going to want to stick around until the very end, because Kate opens up about her pivotal moments, near misses, lessons learned, and stories that are as practical as they are inspiring and sometimes entertaining. If you enjoyed today's conversation, I think you will, please take a moment to subscribe or leave us a review. Not only does it help more people discover these kinds of honest behind-the-scenes stories, but it also inspires me to keep bringing you thoughtful and hopefully what are actionable episodes. Thanks for joining me. And now let's dive right in. For those of you watching a bit later, welcome. I'm really excited about this particular podcast because it combines two of the things that I really like. One of them is the business advisory piece, but it also exemplifies the tech startup space. For those of you who've watched podcasts on this or listened to podcasts or watched the webinars on this, you'll know the art of starting something from scratch and getting it to the point where you get traction is a really interesting process. It's a process which is well defined. There's a lot of science behind it, but even with all that science behind it, sometimes it's one of those areas where you've got to feel your way through it. And I think this is going to be one of those tales where we dive in behind the scenes and find out a little bit more about it. And the fact that it's really strongly grounded in financial services, I think is even more interesting, particularly because there's so many of you out there who are either playing in the space where you're working with clients, advising them in areas just beyond their financial affairs or just beyond their accountant or just beyond their lending. But also because I know there's a lot of businesses out there who are playing with this idea of a client portal and how to use it, how to get traction is really important. To give you the background to this, I first met Kate. I was introduced by a program member, Steve. And I remember being on the first call and she was pointing out this, sharing with me this tool. And as is always the case when you put a software system in front of people, there's always somebody who's going, hey, you should think about doing this. You should think about doing this. And Kate was just listening and nodding and smiling. And in the background, you could see that this wasn't the first time she'd been told all the things she could do with a platform. I also asked her why she wasn't launching it with coaches. And she very respectfully told me that it wasn't the market for her. But it's been interesting to watch it take off since then and just see Kate and her team putting a lot of work to iterate it, get it traction, launch it with more and more firms out there. And I think the space they're in, which is really systematizing and scaling and supporting business advisory, I think is a really important one because it's an area we were talking just before we kicked off about the fact that a lot of accountants and accounting firms go into this with the idea that, yeah, this is going to be a great piece to add into the mix. And they soon find out that if there's one thing that's hard to offer profitably, if you don't structure it, it's business advisory, and often overwhelm you. We're going to go through it. We're going to talk about how Kate ended up from New York all the way to Sydney, which is not the most well-worn path, let's put it that way. They're increasingly well-worn. We're going to talk about how she gets started, how she got traction, and more importantly, where Brieff is at now. And if you're interested in getting involved, what you can do to find out more. So with that said, Kate, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Welcome. How are you this morning?
I'm great. I'm so excited to talk to you, Stu.
Me too. Where are you right now with all your egg cups in the background?
Yes, I'm in Bondi Junction. I'm in a co-working space. I look like I'm in a booth, like dropping an album, but this is just those meeting rooms. And
it looks incredibly music-y and professional, all the rest of it. And I've seen some of the other podcasts you do, and you've got that background. So you've got a bit of consistency going on, which is good.
I'm cool, Stu.
Exactly. Thank you. You're in a startup space. That's at least 50% of the call just picked up. So look, I really appreciate you sitting down with me because I can't remember how long ago we were first introduced. It was at least a year, right? And
It was August last year.
and Steve was one of those people who, no doubt, I mean, he's a very big networker anyway, but I know he's been a big part of your back team as well. So for those who know nothing about Brieff, and this is the
Yeah.
first time they're hearing about it, how would you explain what it is, who it's for, and the problem it's designed to solve?
Yeah, so Brieff is an advisory platform for accounting firms, helping them structure their advisory services so that they can offer and deliver advisory that is more efficient, impactful, and accountable to their small business clients.
You know what? You've done that before.
It's not my first
Exactly. It's
time.
not your first rodeo, as they say. Like, how did you find yourself in this? It must be a long story. So maybe we'll start at the beginning.
Windy road. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're obviously from the States originally.
Yep, I'm from New York originally, born and raised in Manhattan. So yeah, a long way from here.
What's it like growing up in Manhattan?
It's very different. It's very fun. I grew up in an apartment. I walked to kind of school by myself, always in Central Park. Yeah, just always outside exploring the city. So very different than I think a lot of people.
And we were chatting a bit before we started, and you said something like growing up in New York was a real neighborhood experience. And you found it very safe, which kind of sounds a bit weird because we often think about, I don't maybe it's growing up in the sort of 90s where they had like Escape from New York and all of these. You often think about New York as being a metropolis and unsafe and all that stuff going around, but you had apparently a very different experience.
No, I felt so safe. And I was always, it felt very neighborhoody. I knew all the people that owned all the stores around my streets, all the families that lived in my building. Yeah, it felt very safe, very fun. But you're around very different people all the time talking about very different things. And so you're exposed to a lot really early on. And so I think you just dream really big because of it.
Who's your favorite New York-based artist?
Ooh,
Is in music.
I think you have to go with Jay-Z, right?
What's the song? It's A New York State of Mind.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
Alicia Keys.
that's got to be the anthem of New York. I can't think of anything else that
Yeah.
goes that big. So obviously you started off at Goldman Sachs,
Yep.
which is like Goldman Sachs in New York has got to be one of the most prestigious business things
Yes.
to have on your resume. Talk to me about how you ended up in that situation.
Yep. So after I went to University of Colorado, anyone who's watching this, go Buffs. But yeah, so went to, and then right after college, got a job at Goldman Sachs in New York, working in really the prime brokerage space. So I supported the sales team and the client service portion of that. And really just the clients that I worked with were the top hedge funds in the United States,
Yep.
helping them kind of work with Goldman. And that was a really exciting and cool experience. Every stereotype of working at Goldman Sachs is like 100% true. You really do work with the best and brightest, but the job itself is definitely a grind.
Mm,
It's dull on the best of days. I think you are working in a room with 500 people and you are working at an insane rate. But I wouldn't say like the stuff I was doing was necessarily like very stimulating. So it was the people that I worked with, the environment, the hustle was so cool. But I definitely knew very soon that I wanted to do something more or something a little bit more meaningful.
how long into it were you before the kind of, have you heard of the Paris effect?
No, what's the Paris
The
effect?
Paris effect, because I lived in Japan for 2 years, and they have this thing called the Paris effect, where a lot of Japanese people have this idea in their head of what Paris is like, and then they get to Paris, and the reality of what Paris is actually, which is quite dirty, quite old, yeah, that hits home, and it's this gap between expectation and reality. How long was it you were at Goldman before the Paris effect started kicking in?
Oh, I would say day two. I knew pretty quickly that this was not the end game for me. The biggest challenge that I really had at working with at Goldman is that everyone around you, your family, your friends, everyone in your life is telling you how lucky you are to have this job, how
Mm,
prestigious and amazing it is that you are working for this place. And everyone kind of looks at, oh my gosh, you must feel so lucky that you get to do this, that you're having this experience, and you don't feel like that on the inside. And so
right.
you're going to work every day knowing that this isn't what you want to do. But I was there for 4 years, and what kept me there 3 years was the fact that I was so afraid to leave because of everyone else's jumping in, telling me how amazing it is. And that really drives you for a long time.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
had
so hard.
I had the same experience. When I started as an independent coach, I joined a collective of consultants. And the first 2 years was good, but after that, it was like it wasn't going, it wasn't operating, and there was this fear that what if I go and start on my own? What if I don't get traction? What if my clients don't come with me? But in retrospect, when I look back on that, I wish I'd done it sooner.
Yeah, 100%. A
So,
100%.
so what was I find you can usually trace things back to one event. What was the event that you went from not sure about this to that's it, I'm done?
Yeah. So it's actually like a pretty pivotal one. And it's not something that I talk about all the time. It's not part of my elevator pitch of like why I started Brieff or anything, but it's such like a big part of the story. So when I was 25, my dad died suddenly of a heart attack. He like was here one day and then gone the next. And it was really, I mean, for me, like my dad was my person. It was like dad and I, and then like everyone else.
Yeah.
And to have that, I think like such an intense experience, that was the day. It literally was that quick. And prior to him passing away, I had been the only kind of way I thought that I could really get out of Goldman. Because the thing about it was, you want to go somewhere better or you want to
Yeah.
do something. And it was all about perception at that time. What would everyone else think around me? And I just thought, I have to do something that is on par or better to make this kind of jump worth it. And
Okay.
so I had been toying with the idea of going to business school because I thought, okay, I don't really know what I want to do, but this will be like an acceptable jump. And then he passed away, and I just said, that's it. I
Yeah.
cannot do this job another day. And I really don't want to know what I want to do. And I need to take the time to actually figure this out because it just makes you realize how quick life can be.
Hmm.
How you really are only getting to do this one time.
Yeah.
And everyone kind of walks around like they're coming back, and you're not. And so I just put everything I could into going to school and really giving myself the opportunity to really figure out what I wanted to do.
Wow. That sounds like a major kind of thought process
Yeah.
and transformational. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was, I think, I mean, I'm 6 years out of that now. I think with time, there becomes like gratitude. Like, of course, I would do anything for my dad to be here. But I'm so grateful that I had that experience to wake
Mm.
me up. It took a long time to get there, but like, you're so grateful that something could shake you up. And I genuinely believe like I'm doing this for him as well. And I think
Mm.
that really does propel you forward. And so much that used to matter doesn't matter anymore.
It must be a weird feeling because obviously not having to go through that would be better, but at the same time, it was a catalyst for so
Yeah.
much that's happened since.
I wouldn't be able to do this if that didn't happen. Like
Mm.
I genuinely wouldn't be here. And I think sometimes if when you talk to other own like founders or other people going against the path, I don't think that is like a very unique, it's a unique experience, but I think almost all of us have this thing that was so painful or so traumatic that really does push you in a direction. So everyone I've noticed in this kind of circle has something in the
That,
past that has always gotten you there.
that moment. So you go to business school,
Yeah.
and then in between business school and today, there is this trip to go to Sydney,
Yeah.
which like I know there's an increasing US population and community out here, but it's not a well-worn path, particularly from New York to Sydney. Talk us through how that happened.
Yeah. It was really so my dad was from Melbourne. So I've always
Ah,
had,
okay.
yeah. So I've always had US and Australian citizenship. I have family that lives in Melbourne, like cousins and aunts and uncles and things like that. And I had been like a couple times. I wouldn't say like I was like really like I'd spent a ton of time in Australia, but I had visited. And I went to my MBA at Oxford, and halfway through was when COVID hit.
Yep.
And so I personally was like, there's no way that I'm going to go to Oxford and take classes online. And so deferred halfway through for 12 months. At the time, Australia, because of my citizenship, I could either go back to the US or go to Australia.
Yeah.
And Australia was open. Like this was pre-Melbourne lockdowns when I was making this decision. And I think kind of part of this journey was I really wanted, I think it was more subconscious than conscious, but looking back, I think it was like a big driver was like I wanted to feel close to my dad. I wanted to be around people that sounded like him. I wanted to be in that place. And I think that's really served me well. And so I was here for 12 months waiting out COVID, but that feeling of being wrapped in a blanket in that way and was such a massive driver and kind of fell in love with it. And that's what made me want to come back here after graduating.
Wow. I had exactly the same choice. I was came out of university, went to lived in Japan for 2 years, and I got to the point where I was like, I'm not going to stay in Japan forever because I wasn't a career. I was like, I've got an Aussie passport, an English passport. You know what? Let's give that a go. And it just took from there.
Yeah, yeah. And you say yes.
So you're in Melbourne to start with?
I ended up getting a job. I came to Melbourne. I think I was there for 2 weeks staying with family, but I got a job working at a private equity firm waiting out COVID. And so that's how I ended up in Sydney. And
Okay.
then, yeah, fell in love with it.
So did you have this itch to get into the tech startup space, or did it just happen that you met some certain people and it took off from there?
Yeah, so really interesting. I definitely didn't have the itch to get into the tech space. I had the itch of building my own business.
Okay.
And it's interesting because I met my partner and co-founder Matt during our MBA. So he also is at Oxford. And I had always was like, when I was toying about what I wanted to do, and I had always said, I want to work for like a mid-sized company, maybe in strategy. And then when I get older, when I have all this experience, then maybe I'll buy a company, like a small company, and build it up or do something like a search fund or something along those lines. And I
Yep.
think looking back, like that was always a way of there's always like imposter syndrome or feeling like you're not ready or you need X, Y, and Z in order to do the thing you want to do. And Matt also was really in a similar place where he was an engineer. He worked for Santos for 6 or 7 years prior to doing his MBA. And we like found each other really similarly on the same journey of wanting to do something that was purpose driven, that was inherently something that ours and building something. Really, what accelerated that was COVID. So during COVID, it
Okay.
was like, you can't really, don't take the next 10 years to get all this experience. If you want to start something, let's start something now. Let's take the plunge
Yeah.
and let's do it. And we had toyed with other different ideas and failed in different iterations, built business plans and all this stuff. And prior to really getting the idea for Brieff. And then once we had this idea for Brieff, it just went off like wildfire and we just kept going and kept going
Good to
to build it up.
So my impression of the MBA, and I've never done an MBA. I did the whole Tim Ferriss, do you want to spend money on an MBA or just invest in a
Yeah.
startup? So I did the
Yeah.
startup thing. But my impression of it, the training on MBA, is it's always traditionally been aimed at how do you manage large established companies, culture, organization, whereas startup stuff has been very much about iteration. Don't bother with a business plan, do a business model canvas and all the rest of it. Like your experience in the MBA, was there more on the focus of the innovation and tech startup, or did that come later? Because
I
the
would say
rules are
that,
very different.
yeah, I would definitely say nowadays there is definitely more, I think the traditional MBA, I think you're totally right. It's more about managing larger corporations, all these different areas. Now I think they're trying to put in more curriculum around kind of startups, entrepreneurship in that kind of way. So there's
Okay.
definitely a taste of it, but it's definitely nowhere near, I think, a trial by fire or actually doing it will ever teach you. But I think the thing that the MBA gave me most of all is just confidence.
Okay.
And that was by far and away like the most valuable thing for me. It made me confident to be able to have discussions about so many different topics. I think I knew enough to be a expert beginner in about every different kind of element of business, but I was definitely not like a kind of a deep specialist in probably any given one. So it just
Okay.
allowed me to know what I didn't know, but just enough confidence to be able to not only believe in myself, but then also to feel like I could have those conversations with people. And that's totally a self thing.
Okay. So it's
Yeah,
just,
for sure.
so tell me brief version one. Like
Yes.
you've got this, you and Matt have got this idea. And actually start before that. Like
Yeah.
you played around with some ideas. How did you come to decide that firstly, that was the problem you wanted to solve and that was the market you wanted solving? Because those are the two biggest factors I'd imagine involved in any launch decision, market and problem. Talk us through the process that came before that.
Yeah. So really during COVID, things were happening in tandem. It's crazy how the world works. But during COVID, my mom actually bought a restaurant in Montana and or okay, sorry, she bought a strip club in Montana and wanted to turn it into a restaurant. And so this was her retirement
Bet
project.
you would have been happy that it wasn't the other way around, right?
Yeah, clearing out the strip club was strip club was probably more lucrative, but restaurants are hard. But
Restaurants are
no,
hard.
but yeah, so she had bought the strip club that was going out of business, did all the construction work, was turning it into a restaurant. So that was happening on one side. And on the other side, Matt's brother is an electrician by trade, quit his job and wanted to start his own electrician shop. So we both had these like family members that were in the midst of starting these businesses. And so I went over and helped my mom kind of start and run this restaurant like from scratch. And Matt was helping his brother learn everything about business. His brother is incredibly bright, is incredibly good at being an electrician, had no idea about business, and
Yeah.
why would he? And so we had this all of this knowledge from the MBA, all of this incredible frameworks, all of these kind of different case studies and examples or and everything. And separately, and this is a convoluted story, but like separately really saw how those business owners, my mom and his brother, really had a passion, but didn't necessarily have that business acumen. And starting a business and running a business is a mammoth. And it is not for the faint of heart. It is for, I think, the coolest people are business owners, but they need all the support in the world and they deserve all the support in the world. And so we really saw them lean on their accountants for that strategic advice. And also, we were helping giving that strategic advice as well. And so Matt and I were like, it was like the light bulb went off, and we were like, these people need something. They
Okay.
need to be able to have a business advisor. Like every business should have a business advisor if they want one. Every business should have that support. How do we make it easier for the people that they're going to, which happen to be accountants? How do we make it easier for those accountants to be able to give it to them? And that was really the birth of Brieff. And for me, coming from Goldman Sachs, my whole job was client service. If there's one thing I know, it's client service. Like, how do you culminate those client relationships? How do you do that efficiently? How do you have that great experience? And that, like, Goldman was so good at that.
Hmm.
And so it was really about taking all of those things that I had known from Goldman and what we had really learned from the MBA, all these bits and pieces, and put it into a way for accountants to be able to do that in a more efficient way, but also build up incredible relationships with their business clients. And so that was the idea.
So we touched on this in the intro, and I know it's
Yeah.
one of the conversation we had early on, which is you went, okay, I'm going to go to accountants. Was that a specific decision not to do financial advisors, not to do business coaches, or was it just what you knew? Or was it just your frame of reference was people get advice from accountants?
Yeah, it wasn't as strategic as it was strategic in the sense that we knew that we needed to niche really quickly. I think this is the trap, I think, with startups in general, is when we're like talking really like nuts and bolts 0 to 1, like how do you just get like I don't know if we're allowed to swear, but like the shittiest MVP out there?
Yep.
You
Please
really need to
swear as
be
much as you want.
you need to be so specific. And I think that is very counterintuitive because a lot of startups, you're all you want to do is look at how big this market size is going to be. And so it's very counterintuitive of being like, we need to niche so specific in order to then go to this crazy, insane market.
Yeah.
The reason I think the reason why, and we could have picked business coaches, I think we could have picked consultants, we could have picked different people, but the reason why we picked accountants was that we personally just saw how that was really the first line of defense. If you don't know, if you're a business owner and you don't know a business coach to reach out to, or you don't, it's a big step to do that. But we just saw these informal questions, and accountants are going to hate this, but like all the scope creep, they know this. It just goes to the accountant. And so that was why we chose them first
That makes
to
perfect sense. And
focus on.
I would add to it, most business coaches out there are not at a level where they can support that. Like it's still a
Yeah,
very, not a well-established industry. And I'd even go as far if I was going to be really critical and say the majority of coaches out there are very good at marketing themselves, but I think you can, the guy, once you actually do really well, far fewer.
yeah,
Whereas accountants, they're
100%.
usually established, they've got multiple different streams. And sure, they're not going to be able to tell you where to spend your marketing, but they are going to be able to tell you metrics and establishing systems and reporting that you need in place. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
And also I think financial literacy for business owners is really the first thing that a business owner needs to learn really
Good
quickly.
point.
And that is accountants are the person, right? They can sit there and explain to you what is a P&L. How do you read that? Let's look at the balance sheet. How do you read this? It's really about that financial and business literacy. That's, I personally think, like advisory 101. And it's so critical.
Even I can even say as far as a lot of what accountants do, profit and loss balance sheets can be useful, but cash in, cash out.
Yeah,
That's one of the most
100%.
important things to have because your profit and loss might look good, but if you run out of cash, you're dead. And
100%.
that's one of the things that a lot of people just assume they can get all of the information by looking at their zero reports, and you can't.
You cannot. 100%. 100%.
One of the best books. Have you read The Profit? You probably have Profit First by Michael McAlevich.
Yes, yes,
Such a good
yes.
book.
Great.
Like I think that should
Great book.
be textbook learning for every single person who gets past that initial stage in a business. Otherwise, yeah, it'll get early stage, it'll get you out of trouble with the tax man, and it'll enable you to avoid a lot of pain in the long run.
100%.
Um,
100%.
okay, so you go right. We're gonna solve this problem because we care about it. Because I wish you'd told me the strip mall. We could have gone more S's in the title. Swamped at Sachs to strip malls to Sydney and startups. It would have been great. Anyway, so you did it because you're passionate. You wanted to see how can we make this easier, recognize that financial literacy, and that's a really good point, is not actually a common skill amongst business owners. And you asked that question, how can we get something out quickly, which the
Yeah.
market is going to be big enough for future growth?
Yeah.
Tell me how you go from, okay, we got an idea to building an MVP to going out there and getting enough people to go, yep, we like your solution. We're going to pay money for it.
Yeah. So something that is like so ingrained in like our values, something we live and breathe by, is that we are building alongside the community that we're building this for. And that's really happened since day one. And I think I worked in finance, but I personally am not an accountant and I've never pretended to be one. Matt's never pretended to be one. And so it was so important for us to not only be accepted by that community, but also build with them. And because we're trying to add value for them, and the only way to do that is alongside them. And so, just with our idea, we worked with a group called the Early Adopters Hub. They are a group of forward thinking accounting firms that really help tech products actually build tech that will add value for
Wow. Okay.
firms, not just sell to them. And so through this group, we worked with 16 firms in Australia and New Zealand for 12 months. And we just had an idea and then through and just did countless research calls and interviews. And they were so incredibly kind and welcoming to us. Let us like really see their process, really see their pain points and their workflows, and really opened up their firms to us. And
Hmm.
so through that process, we built and designed Brieff together, is how I would describe it.
How did you fund it?
We scrappy, like really scrappy. We received funding from Antler was like our first check.
Okay.
And this is like actually I think the really beautiful thing was so we got funding from Antler, which was 120K, and we made that last almost 12 months. So everyone can do the math on that. But
No,
the
noodles by the sounds of it.
yeah, and then we actually did an angel round after that. We did a 300K angel round, and the majority of the angels we have, I would say 90% of the angels that we have are either our first users or accountants or in the accounting industry. So a lot of our first users actually came back to us and said, "Can we invest?" Which is
Wow,
the most
that's
beautiful
good.
thing. Yeah.
I've actually, it's the first time I've heard of this early adopters hub, and I love it. Where, like, how did you find out about it? Because that
Okay.
idea of essentially you're seeding your product's feedback loop with users who eventually become the funders. That's amazing.
Yeah. So we found out about this through actually our accountant. Yeah, I had actually the power of LinkedIn should never be undermined, or it's just incredible. I put a post out when we had this idea and just said, "Hey, by the way, we're thinking this. Does anyone want to talk?" And an accountant in Adelaide who was really into tech, really into startups, reached out to me, said, "I'd love to talk to you." We got to chatting. He's now become a very good friend of ours. He's also our accountant, but he was like, "You need to talk to these guys." And that's how we got connected.
Wow.
And it's once you put it out there, like things do happen.
Yeah, what's that thing when I was doing the incubator startup thing that we were doing a while ago, we used to one of the challenge we used to set people, particularly those who are like, oh, I don't want to give my idea to anybody. We'd say, pick your
Mm.
biggest competitor, go into the front desk, try and make an appointment with anybody, and just give them your idea. Nobody's interested.
No one's interested. The other thing too is never be afraid to talk about your ideas because everything is in the execution. Execution is so damn hard and
Mm,
it's actually everything. So ideas are great. Everyone has them. Everyone has the same idea. It's very hard to have a novel idea. If I told you the ideas for Brieff, like it's not new. It really isn't. But it can be difficult to execute. And that's where it lies, I think.
So let's talk about the early stage. You've got a basic product, which no doubt, if you're following the Reid Hoffman idea, you would have been completely embarrassed by it looking back on it.
Oh.
You've got people who are buying into it. You've got users. How does it go from there? How are you progressing it? How are you making sure that you're not just got a nice little niche product that a few people use, but you're turning it into something where people are going, oh, maybe I'll try it. Maybe I'll try it. And yes, this is working.
Yeah, so this is where I think it's really important where you explain when we had the worst MVP. I mean, like the MVP, and then there was what we had was like so basic, right? But I think because we were working with the 16 firms for months and months, we had this big vision. We had this big place that we wanted to be. We were very vocal about like where that was going, what we were going to do, what we were going to build, all this stuff. And that what they are seeing when we eventually show them the MVP and have them use it, that this is really day one. And the
Yeah.
only way we can get to this North Star is with their help. And so that's why I think they came back and back. And so there was a lot of forgiveness, but they were using this with their clients. They were getting feedback from their clients. We then iterated it. We deployed new features and features. And so they were on the journey with us.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you have to, I think that really is the secret sauce. And that's what gets people coming back is that they're not there for what you actually have in that MVP. It's probably not adding that much value, but it's the kind of vision of where this is going, what it could be. And they know that they're an integral part of that. I think
Mm.
everyone feels this camaraderie to get there.
I'm just assuming the answer to the question, how do you get that kind of encouragement support is just speak to a lot of people very frequently, tell the story and just listen to what they're saying and make a lot of promises. Is there more to it than that?
I think you have to be really authentic and you can't sell. Like I wasn't selling a dream and for those, to be quite frank, for those 16 firms, we told them they could have it free for life. That was like our promise to them. And in the grand scheme of things, like if this is going to be a unicorn, 16 firms, that's a drop in the bucket. It was a lot at the time, especially when you're not bringing any revenue and you're burning cash. That's a big commitment. And I
Yeah.
think they recognize that and we'll always stand by that. But I think it's about you're also hearing a lot of things you don't want to hear. It's really hard because this is your full-time job. You're putting a lot of things on the line. You feel the stresses of not having a career. You feel the stresses of not having money. All of those things are at play. And then you're getting feedback saying, oh, I don't like this, or I think you're doing this wrong, or which is perfectly valid, but it's always taking a second to not take that personally, to actually take that feedback in, and then really being able to decide, okay, is that feedback warranted in terms of, is that a nice to have? Is that a need to have? Is that for only a specific firm? Is that for every firm? And that really, you have to check yourself all the time. So it's easy to say all these things, but it's really hard to do them
Was there
when
any
you're in the thick of it.
was there any particular moment or time, and maybe it's just one day that you can look back on and go, that was a day you almost went, screw it, I'm going to get a job. And
Yes,
what happened?
I actually applied for a job. I did an interview at a job because I was so afraid. And this was like before we had an MVP. This was like just in the idea phase. We were trying to get funding from Antler, but that was getting really difficult. I wasn't sure if that was going to happen. And it was really in that interview, I was like, there is no way I can. It was just like so not who I was. And you have to check yourself. But yeah, absolutely. You're in the thick of it.
Sounds like another sliding doors moment.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Would you say you're naturally somebody who is quite optimistic and as a result you're open to taking risks, or the opposite?
Yeah. Yes, I think
Okay.
I am. So I naturally am optimistic. Like I'm not naturally, I naturally see the glass half full. It takes a lot, I think, to get me down. And I really have always been open to taking risks. But it is really interesting. I think the most unhappiest I've ever been, like working at Goldman, even though I love the people, like just knowing that's not what I'm supposed to be doing, I can really feel that. And so, yeah, I think I am more naturally inclined to take risks that maybe other people aren't.
Do you personally have any coping strategies that you deal with when oh, this is going wrong? Should I stick? Should I twist?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I think that I really gravitate towards people who are a lot smarter than I am, or I perceive them as a lot smarter, or have something that I don't really have in terms of wanting to learn off them. And for example, like my co-founder, Matt, is so ingrained in like the kind of like David Goggins, all of that
That
kind
man
of
is crazy.
mindset. Yeah, like just really into kind of these high performing, exceptional people and learning how to be better at that. And I think the way that I've been able to get through this is really having him reiterate those messages or learnings or kind of mindsets. And I think that without that, you can't really, I couldn't really do it. So I think having like that stable force, like I'm very externally impacted, like
Right.
my environment plays like a big part. And so I think I wouldn't be this way if I didn't have someone that was constantly pushing that, like that mindset or how to look at this or what these people are doing and opening my mind to that.
Yeah. There's a few different perspectives on this, but like some people say the biggest decision you'll ever make in your personal life is who you choose as your partner. And similarly, I think the
Yeah.
biggest decision you'll make in your business relationship is who you choose to make your partner, ironically. And I've been doing what I do pretty independently for a while now, but the longer I've gone on with it, the more I think that if you're going to break through and build something that is a true business, not like a consulting business where there's a dependency, you can't do it alone. It has to be a
No,
group effort. It's especially in startup where they have the rule of threes, which is you've got to have the visionary, you've got to have the technical person, and you've got to have the person who can go out and build the relationships and represent the product.
100%. I think it's like by far the most important decision. You are in such a fire that it's so hard to describe. I think if you've never experienced the intensity, the pressure of building a startup or building a business is so much more than really you can ever really articulate. And I think it is so important to do that with someone that not only that you trust completely, but really is able to pick up or do the things that you're unable to do. And really having the different skill sets is like so incredibly important.
Did you track your runway?
Yeah,
Uh,
we still do. Yeah,
Okay. So what was the shortest runway you ever had?
we had 15K in the bank.
Wow.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, that would have been stressful.
You know
When you
what? But it was so stressful. And then I remember like feeling sick thinking about that. And that was the week that I would say five of our users became angels. Like they didn't, like it just happened in this crazy kind of swoop.
I've got this theory that the universe likes to play chicken.
Yeah.
And like obviously you don't want to get to a point where you're completely stressed and you're having a nervous breakdown, but sometimes it's just about holding the line. If you really believe it,
Yeah.
you got to hold the line. You got to make sure, yeah, you keep going.
The other thing too, and I think it's really important for people who are watching this because I want to give a little bit more context and like perspective is Matt and I, we don't have kids. We don't have a mortgage. We're in our early 30s. We don't really, we're like adults with a lowercase a. Like we don't have responsibilities really. And
Yeah.
so I think that is like really important to note because I don't think that I'm not trying to say everyone should do this or everyone can put themselves in this position, but like for us, we were able to do that and we
Yeah.
really stretched it to the limit. And I think having that freedom, it's really important to say we really had that freedom of we didn't have really that many responsibilities. Yes, it was scary. Yes, I was on a lower salary. I'm still on a lower salary now than I did when I first started Goldman when I was at 22. But those are things why you're doing them. And I wouldn't expect someone who had a family or whatever to be able to do that as well. So I think that's just like important to note.
It's not undoable. It's just easier to fail when you don't have the weight of a lot of responsibilities on you. And yes,
Yeah.
to be honest, it's easy to do a lot of things. Rach and I'd quit a corporate back in 2009, travel around the world before kids, and
Yeah.
no way we could do that. That wouldn't happen. We get a letter from the school going, "Where are the kids? Oh, they're in Guatemala." No, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So similarly, obviously, there's those days where you went, "Oh, this isn't going to work." What was the moment where you were like, or there may have been multiple moments, but it feels good when it starts to kick off that you knew it was starting to turn into something that was not just viable, but possibly going to be big.
Yeah. So I think momentum is so important and so powerful. Like momentum is the thing that is like the driver. And I definitely believe like there are definitely waves, right? Like you're riding the wave and then it gets hard and then a wave comes again. And that's so been the true for us. And so every kind of dip, I know I'm like, okay, if this is getting really hard, it's gonna get easier in the future. Like it really does have seemed to work that way. There was a day it was like really 4 months after we launched the product, like in October, where we just saw crazy engagement.
Mm.
And that was really cool. The other thing too is we were, we had an accounting firm who was using our product really early days. We had been working with them for a really long time. And the idea for the MVP was like super basic. And the MVP only had this thing, what we call check-in. So it would check in with clients prior to the meeting to really just ask them what they wanted to talk about. And it was questions like, what's giving you energy in your business? What's taking your energy? What are the top three burning issues? All of this stuff. But our kind of assumption was that accountants don't know to ask these questions. It's too uncomfortable in the meeting. If they had this information ahead of time, then they could effectively prep and be able to have a more kind of valuable advisory session. But it was just this check-in piece. And we had an accounting firm that was like, okay, like I'll use like your shitty MVP, but I'm going to use this with a friend. And I know
Thanks.
them really well. Yeah, like it'll be fine just in case like something goes wrong or whatever. His friend had a business. He was the accountant for this business doing advisory. Through this check-in, and prior to checking in, he had gone to this his friend's place, had spent 3 nights with him. They were really close. So in this check-in, this accountant got this check-in back, and it was like all of my internal systems are like completely like taking up all of my time. I don't know what to do. It's like literally the only thing I think about. It's causing so much stress. The problem is that this accountant had never really asked the question, what is your biggest pain points right now? And never
Yeah.
really thought to have this conversation. The business owner never really thought that I should be telling my friend slash accountant this.
Yeah.
And this accounting firm, part of their services is they do internal system software kind of implementation and
Wow.
rewrites and all this stuff. So all of a sudden he was like, wait a second, like I could do all of this for you. Like, how long have you been dealing with all this stuff? Because we can help you. And it was like,
Wow.
that was like really the first light bulb moment of, holy shit, this, we really did add value. Like, we really are doing something
Yeah.
that might not have taken place. And then from there, we got more stories like that and more stories that were similar. And then we then added from like an accounting firm was like, I just don't even know how my clients feel. So we made a mandatory feeling question of
Yeah.
asking businesses, how do you, or business owners, how do you feel about your business? How do you feel about our sessions together? And then that kind of took it to another level. And so you
100%.
can see the snowball of everyone together.
I'm just doing a course at the moment, actually. I'm in the middle of it called, and one of the areas we do is called the engagement on ramp. It's the first 90 days when you work with a client. And the idea is you mobilize certain touch points. Some are information based, so you give people information as they need it. Some's involving them, get people adoption, which you know all about. And the other one is excite and delight. But one of the most powerful templates you can do with four versions of it, it's just, we call it the house things check-in. And it just goes out and it's literally, I'm not emailing you for any reason. I just want to know how are things.
Yeah.
Do you need anything? And out of all of the responses that businesses will get, that is the one that people just open up.
Yeah.
And it's the power of just asking a question that is, there's no, we need to get this back, or can you do this for us, or giving you an update on this piece of work we're doing. It's completely untethered and it's completely open-ended. It's a phenomenal touch point. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's so cool. It's amazing like what those little things can do.
Yeah. So where are things at now as we stand?
Yeah. So right now we are actually just about to expand into the UK, which we're really excited about. So this whole kind of learning process that we did with the Australian market, and we'll still be in Australia. That whole learning process we did with the Australia kind of firms, we're now starting from scratch with the UK firms
Wow.
and just, yeah, doing this incredible research with them. And I think the bigger kind of reason why is we do want to be a global business. And
Okay.
it's easier for us now to understand the similarities and differences between the UK and Australian market as we continue to build the product than having this very mature product and realizing, oh, half of it isn't relevant to a different
Yeah.
market for whatever reason. And so that's been really exciting.
Not the US.
Not yet.
Why not? Too big.
The US too big. I think for us, it's been really important to stay really scrappy. Like we really don't spend that much money. We build the whole product in-house. So we've built the whole product. We're really intentional with marketing spend and how we go about that because we want to test a lot of different things and we don't want to spend $20,000 on a booth or something like that and have that fall flat for whatever reason. And so I think for us, it's really intentionally. And I think when you have those types of constraints, you actually get really creative.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
you can do things, and I think time and money are sometimes like the biggest killer. And yeah, so that's really how we've been thinking about it. And I think we want to stay that way as we can continue to grow until we really get to an inflection point of, oh, this is the product, or this is what's adding the most value, and then
Mm,
scaling that. But that's our method.
I love it. Oh, and are you going to move over to the UK?
We're going to be over there for a couple months. So
Nice.
we'll, starting in October, we'll be over there for a couple months.
And were you over there with the Oxford MBA, or you never got to go there?
No, I was there. I was there
You
the
were there.
whole, yeah, for the whole MBA. Yeah.
I'd be interested to know because I've done some work with UK planners, and the US is really interesting in what I do because it's two very similar markets, but they're slightly out of phase. The terminology is different. The products
Yeah.
they look the same, but they're not the same. The UK is a bit more similar, but the legislation's different over there. And yeah, it's an interesting spot. So I want to talk about Brieff moving forward. And if
Yeah.
someone's listening to this and they're like, that sounds really interesting. Yeah, I'd like to offer business advisory. And I deliberately, we haven't talked about the features and benefits because
Yeah. Yeah.
ultimately, if someone wants to talk about that, there's plenty of information. What kind of business is this for and who's it not for?
Yeah. So this is for small to medium accounting firms that are currently doing advisory services, but really looking to grow that service offering and also empower more junior people to get involved with that process. Oftentimes, advisory might be stuck with really that one or two partners at the firm. And they want to enable more juniors to get involved. So really those smaller accounting firms
Okay.
is really our ICP.
So typically it'll be an accounting firm that's dipped their toes in the advisory
Yeah,
water. They maybe got a little bit of traction with it, but they've recognized that, well, we don't have the structure or we don't really know how to structure in the background to scale it
exactly.
up. Okay, cool.
Exactly.
Perfect.
It
And
is.
if, sorry,
Oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead. No,
I
you go
was just
ahead.
going to say it's not for firms that have never done advisory before. And it is really also not for the major mid-market firms or the top, not that, but like even like the big four or something like that. It's really
Okay.
for the small to medium-sized
Because
firms.
they basically take yours, rip it off, build their own.
That and also change management is a beast.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's the major difference in what I do between when I'm working with the management team and I'm working with the board. It's so much more time on change management. The bigger you are, the
Yeah,
slower you have to move, right?
yeah, exactly.
If somebody is listening to this and go, oh, I'd really like to get business advisory, would you advise, like we've spoken about how to get something launched, would you not suggest they do similar sort of thing, go out there, find a couple of clients who you'd like to do it with, maybe do it at low cost and work it out?
Oh, 100%. I think it's actually very hard pressed to find accounting firms that aren't doing business advisory. They're just not charging for it. I think that when you're answering questions from clients and even just like showcasing any sort of interest in their business or what they're doing, and you're not just doing tax returns, that's a form of advisory and really
Hmm,
leaning into that relationship.
makes total sense. Okay, final question. If someone wants to get involved in Brieff, they want to adopt it, how can they talk to you? What's the best way of going about it?
Yeah, so they can either go to our website and they can book a demo with me of the product, or they can get in touch with me at kate@brieff.io or connect with me on LinkedIn.
Brieff. Of course, your house in Ireland, don't you?
Yeah.
That's IRL. Is it
IO.
IL? IL, cool.
I
IO. Oh, sorry, I thought you said IRL.
no, IO.
What is IO anyway? What does it stand for?
It's the new, I'm not really sure what it
I'm
stands
on the
for, but I
line.
do know it's like the new domain that a lot of kind of tech
Startups
companies are
do.
using. And also it's just because it's an easier domain to get.
Ah, oh, we should get IO then.
Yeah,
Although
because
I wouldn't.
.com.au, like every name's taken with .com.au.
Yeah. Originally, I wanted to call my company Cadence Consulting, and I couldn't get it, so I ended up.
Yeah,
It's a long story, but anyway, this has been awesome. Thank you so
this
much.
is
It's been.
awesome.
I can't wait to see where the next year goes for you guys because obviously the UK, the US. I don't know. Maybe you'll eventually launch in other areas and work with coaches. Who
Yeah,
knows?
we'll go
Any final
worldwide.
thoughts?
I just want to say a big thank you for having me. This has been such an incredible discussion and being able to chat about our journey. It's really cool. And it's been so amazing to connect with you and be able
Yeah,
to
you
have
too.
these chats.
I remember when we sat down and talked about it, I was like, yep, this year you come across an incredibly smart person. You're also incredibly personable, but the solution and what you were putting on the table, I was like, yeah, there's a problem there. And congratulations on where you've come.
Thank you. I'm really excited to stay in touch and
Yeah, you
maybe we'll
too.
do this again in 12 months time for a check-in.
I would love to do that. That would be awesome. So that wraps up another episode of The Finnovator, and today we dug into what was a fascinating journey from Manhattan to Sydney, via Goldman Sachs, Oxford, even a strip club turned restaurant in Montana, and more importantly, the story behind the platform. If any part of Kate's story resonated with you, and if you're a practice looking to take your advisory offering to the next level, don't forget, please, you can reach out to Kate directly or just book a demo at brieff.io. If you find value in this conversation, I'd love you to consider subscribing or leaving a review. It genuinely helps more growth-minded professionals like yourself find us, and it keeps the inspiration going. And if you're hungry for even deeper insights or you want access to our full masterclass catalog, behind-the-scenes tools, and a vibrant community, feel free to join us at the Audere Practice Success community simply by visiting success.audere.com.au. As always, thank you for being a listener, and I'll see you on the next episode of The Finnovator.